Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So yeah, I had to change over to another internet signal. You probably got a notification and then all of a sudden I wasn't there. So I am here. Let me make sure I have sound. And my sound is where it is supposed to be. Good. And good. Hope everyone is doing okay this afternoon. Hard Bastard is going to be on the show Monday at 7 p.m. That should be a fucking amazing show. Hard Bastard, I like his show. I don't necessarily agree with him on everything. But that being said, I don't necessarily care. In the area to which we're going to talk about, I think we're going to have a complete agreement or a pretty decent conversation. So that should be good. I want to talk about propaganda. Let's talk about propaganda. And let's talk about propaganda from the standpoint of news. Now, Hard Bastard does this a lot. I don't do this as often as I used to. But I want to review a news article that was written by NBC News. They call it news. I'm putting it in quotes. It's more like a propaganda network or a stenographer network. A network of stenographers. Let's call it that. A plane crash. A helicopter went down in the Middle East. They said in Western Iraq. Let's put Western Iraq in quotes. The media recounts this, and he gives us the information. Let's take a look at the article itself and what they gave us. And I have questions. For whatever reason, the person who's doing this does not have questions, but I have questions. Now, the first, give me 1 second. There we are. So the first thing, 7 service members killed in Iraq helicopter crash. Okay. All 7 service members aboard an American military helicopter that crashed in western Iraq late Thursday were killed, according to 2 U.S. military officials. The crash of the U.S. HH-60 Path Hawk helicopter does not appear to be a result of enemy activity, and the incident is under investigation, U.S. Central Command and military officials said. All personnel aboard were killed in the crash, said U.S. Army Brigadier General Jonathan B. Braga, the Director of Operations for the United States-led anti-Islamic State coalition in Iraq and Syria. The helicopter, used by the Air Force for combat such as air and rescue, was in transit from one location to another when it went down on Thursday afternoon near the town of Qam, where there is the anti-ISIS coalition has an outpost near the Syrian border. An accompanying U.S. helicopter immediately reported the crash, and quickly reaction force comprised of Iraqi security forces and coalition members secured the scene, according to the statement from CENTCOM. Just a quick point. All of this is what we're being told. Like, there's nobody there. There's not a person who's there who's looking at what's taking place as a reporter and is reporting back. These guys are just giving you what they said. They're stenographers. This took place. The military general said this took place. Okay. And how many people? Oh, okay. How many people died? All right. That's it. And they were recounted to the audience. I have questions. I mean, we can go back to the article just to finish the article, but there are certain questions that really should be asked that aren't asked at all. They're like, and in the way that they give the information, it gives across as if you're, as the user, is getting actual real information. Like this is a flat fact of what took place of this particular event. They're stenographers. They're paid stenographers. State media stenographers. For all intents and purposes, we could have had somebody come out of the State Department and say the exact same thing. The job of the media is not to be stenographers. The job of the media should have been to get to the bottom of what actually took place. There's no investigative journalists there. They're stenographers. They've given their soul over just to access. While the investigation is still ongoing, there is absolutely no reason to believe this involved enemy action, said Colonel Thomas Veal, a spokesman for the U.S.-led coalition battling Islamic State. All indications are this was an accident during a routine troop movement. The Department of Defense will release casualty details next of kin locations are complete. U.S.-led coalition has continued to work with Iraq and Syrian democratic forces to shore up the border across to make sure the region fighters and insurgents can't move freely across the region. Okay. The first question. Is it really Western Iraq? Is it really Western Iraq? Like, is that in Syria? I guess what I'm asking is something pretty basic. How does the media know that it was in Western Iraq versus Syria? How? Fact is, they don't. They don't know at all. Second point. Russia has said that any forces that are attacking Syrian forces, the Russians will attack. That's what they've said. We've allied ourselves with Syria, Iraq, Iran, Syria. Iran, Syria, and Russia. If there are forces that attack us, we will attack them back. How do we know that that copter wasn't attacked? How do we know that it wasn't attacked and went down, and it didn't necessarily want to say that the helicopter was attacked and went down because of the political consequences and fallout of such a thing? I'm asking, how do they know? Russians are in Syria having operations. The United States is also in Syria doing operations. I'm trying to show you how close in the margins these things are to one another. And beyond that, they're not curious about how the United States, what justification the United States is using to be in Syria. The Iraq, I just looked at it. The 2002, 2001, 2002 military authorization of force. That's for Iraq. How are you in Syria? The newsman is in no way curious about that. Wait a minute. What justification are you using this here? Right there, he even said for Iraq and Syria. Well, Syria is a sovereign country. Syria doesn't want us in their country. How does the newsman skip and skate around the notion that these guys are in Syria and have no constitutional authority to do so? The newsman is not curious about this? I'm not going to push it. I mean, I guess I'll look at it and say to myself, yeah, you're having operations in a country that they don't want you to have operations in. You're going really close to the margins of another government who's also in the process of a war. And beyond that, the United States-led coalition has continued to work with Iran, Iraq, and Syrian democratic forces to shore up the border region to make sure the fight. What are Syrian democratic forces? What is this? What is this? That's a terrorist group. Call it what it is. That's a terrorist group. The reason I say that is the Syrian government is the government of Syria. I have no idea what the Syrian democratic forces are. That's a group of terrorists. Now, let's go beyond that. They say they're fighting ISIS. Okay, you're fighting ISIS. Then why have the United States and Saudi Arabia been given those ISIS weapons? The United States and Saudi Arabia armed significantly enhanced military capabilities, report reveals. Number of United States and Saudi supplied weapons in ISIS hands go far beyond that would have been available through battle capture alone. Does this newsman who's given this story know that? Does Richard Engel know that? Well, what I'm asking is, it doesn't add up. That's what I'm asking. The newsman is not curious about that not adding up. The United States is supposed to be in Syria fighting ISIS. Great. Why does the group have in its hands weapons from the United States and Saudi Arabia that exceed what they could get on the battlefield? Why? That's curious. That shouldn't happen. How is that happening? How are they getting their hands on these weapons? Second question. Why are you aligning yourself with the Syrian democratic forces when there is an actual Syrian government that would work with you if you wanted to work with it to actually get rid of the terrorist groups? What is the Syrian democratic force? If there was a force in the United States, let's say they call themselves the Confederacy. Yeah, let's say they call themselves Confederates. And let's say that Confederate force tried to take over the United States government. What would we call that Confederate force? We would probably call them terrorists. The United States has aligned itself with terrorists. The newsman in no way points that out. The newsman doesn't even see that. The newsman acts as if that terrorist group that the United States is affiliating itself with is not a terrorist group at all, and is something other than what it actually is. Call it what it is. I hear this and I'm like, what the hell? And just to make the point about the military authorization thing. Congress passed a second authorization military force, giving the president the authority to use armed forces of the United States as he determines to be necessary and appropriate in order to defend the national security of the United States against continuing threat posed by Iraq. By Iraq. I-R-A-Q. By Iraq. Enforce all relevant UN Security Council resolutions regarding Iraq. Iraq. Not Somalia. Not Somalia. Not Syria. Not Yemen. Not Libya. We're talking about Iraq. Currently, however, the United States military has deployed and equipped for combat in at least 19 countries. Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Somalia, Libya, Kenya, Niger, Cameroon, Uganda, South Sudan, Democratic Republic of Congo, Central African Republic, Djibouti, Jordan, Turkey, Egypt, Cuba, and Kosovo. Was the military authorization that was passed, was that meant to be a blank check of war for the President of the United States? When they first passed this, did they really intend that whoever was going to be president could go gallivanting around the globe, anywhere around the globe, attack anywhere he wanted to around the globe, invade any country he wanted to around the globe, and then use the fig leaf of, we're supposed to be able to do this in Iraq? How does this take place? Is it legal? Is the first question. And how come the news media, the newsman right there, who's looked spiffy in his shirt sitting in Moscow, why don't they ask those questions that are the most pertinent questions? Are we a country of laws or not? If we're not a country of laws, let's dispense with it and just say so. If we are, the president should not have the authority to go into any country that he wants. And the idea that these guys are taking operations in Syria should concern that newsman greatly, seeing that it's against the law. It's against the law. I'm not going to belabor this point. I read this stuff, and my first thought is always, why aren't they asking the questions that matter? And more so, not just asking the questions that matter. They're taking this perspective as if whatever the United States is doing, the United States is right in what the United States is doing. Never really asking the question of, why are we there? Should we be there? What's the point of us being there? Is it productive that we are there? Is it adversely affecting us? Is it making us less safe? They don't ask these questions. These questions get thrown to the wayside. Instead, the newsman just stenographers. We lost a few people in this country, in this region of the world. Why were they there? Why are we losing people in that region of the world? Shouldn't those people be at home? Look, if you support the troops, you support the troops by keeping their ass at home. That's how you support the troops. I don't want my troops, I don't want my cousin, uncle, nephew, brother, cousin, mom, anybody else going into some stupid ass war that doesn't affect me. It affects me from the standpoint of you killing somebody and you making those people want to kill Americans. But from the standpoint of enemy at our gates, there are no enemies at our gates. And the bill that I just read to you, that doesn't apply. What they're doing in Syria doesn't apply. The newsman doesn't ask it. The newsman doesn't question it. The newsman would tell you that and then move on to the next story about getting a kitten out of the tree. Our news media sucks. Our news media sucks. That's late light news having this conversation, and the only thing people are walking away with, oh, our troops died in Syria. Oh, sucks. Oh well. Want a burger from McDonald's? Burger from McDonald's. Yeah. We have a porn star to talk about. Yeah, we have a porn star to talk about. Right. I know, right? I refuse to talk that story, right? I was not going to open that story. I thought it was so fucked up. Like, and just as a quick aside, I've been resisting having the conversation about the porn star thing. The news media has been blowing it up. The news media is talking about having this kind of show on TV, talking to the porn star about Donald sucks. Do you understand what they're talking about? They're talking about having a sex with the porn star, the president of the United States. And they're running that as a late night story. Most people have sex, as far as I know. I don't understand why that's news. That being said, it's this kind of salacious stuff that they dress it up in because they're wearing suits and talking in a particular style. But this is really salacious stuff. Look, they hate Donald Trump. They've thrown away all level of objectivity. I greatly dislike Donald Trump. I try to be objective. I'm probably not on some of that stuff because I dislike Donald Trump. But they hate him with a passion, and they pretend to be objective, but they've thrown objectivity all the way out the window. They're literally having this conversation, or they're going to have a story about a porn star that had sex with Donald Trump. What can she tell you other than, I've had sex with Donald Trump? I don't understand what they're going to get out of this other than some kind of shaming or some kind of just show in order to embarrass Donald Trump. It just seems weird to me. I don't quite get this. I don't quite get it. Yeah, it's a distraction. It's funny, but yeah, distraction. It's a distraction. They're leading us closer to the brink of war. And this is the shit that they're putting on television. It's just fucking insane. It's absolutely insane. James Sarvis is disgusting. Who even wants to think about that? I think they want to embarrass him. I think that's what the point of it is. Remember the time we were falsely told Iraqis let babies die so we could go to war? Breanna Wilson. Yeah, I remember that. I remember that. I absolutely remember that. Do you remember the time when we had put sanctions on Iraq and 500,000 babies died because we put sanctions on Iraq? I remember that. I remember that. Jamal, did you see the full unedited interview with Putin and Kelly? I saw part of it. Look, I did a part of that where they cut a part of it out. The part they cut out was fucking amazing. Because Vladimir Putin, whatever you want to think of the guy, said something that was perfectly and completely true. Your media has whipped up this Russia nonsense for political ends. And you need to attend to your affairs. That has nothing to do with Russia. That has everything to do with you. Like, and they cut that out. It was like, yeah, we don't want people to see that part. We don't want people to see that part at all. It's on Rupley YouTube. I saw part of it. I did see part of it. Captain Obvious. Pat Hacker agreed, and thank you. As much as you reminded me, I meant to watch Ken Burns' documentary on PBS on the Vietnam War. Yep. Yeah, Ken Burns will take us some heat for that. The reporter's name is Robert Engel of NBC. Yeah, that's him. I remember Robert Engel. He's a likable guy. I don't take anything. I'm not taking shots at Robert Engel. My point in this is mainstream media takes a particular perspective that whatever the United States is doing in the world is right, just by definition of it being the United States. That perspective is wrong. It's fundamentally wrong. Like, it's a bias that's so built into it. It's so ensconced into it. It's like you're watching state media. Like, even when the United States is doing something for bad ends, they act as if the United States just fucked up, as opposed to the United States intentionally doing something for bad ends. Like, would they have ever carried the story that the CIA was planning on bombing the Cuban thing? Probably not. They probably would never carry that story. The fact they cut that part of an NBC interview or the interview with Megyn Kelly, it's kind of my point. They look at this stuff from a very particular perspective. Why on earth would you just purely take the general's word for it, or the people you're talking to, the military commander's word for what took place? I mean, granted, if you don't have people out there, I guess that's what you have to do. But let's be honest, they have just as much intent or just as much pressure to lie, depending upon the situation, as anybody else would. I mean, come on. Why would you take what they're saying as being accurate and true? It's like these politicians lie in a heartbeat. I don't understand why they think generals wouldn't do the same, especially if there are larger consequences to what has taken place. Meaning, if that plane didn't just crash, if that thing was shot down, then you run into certain fundamental questions. Who was it shot down by? During the Cold War, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, there was a part where the pilots were going over trying to get film and trying to get film of coverage. And what they told them was, don't get shot down. Don't get shot down. Fact is, if those planes got shot down, that would have been an international incident because Russia would have shot the plane down. Now, the plane did get shot at, but do you honestly believe they went to tell reporters that the plane was shot at? Fuck no. Fuck no. They would have lied through their teeth. They don't want to provoke an international incident in the same way they didn't want to provoke an international incident now, if that's what took place. Again, I am not saying that that's what took place. I'm saying that the reporter doesn't know. They're taking this stuff as stenographers. They haven't been there. They haven't talked to anybody there other than the commander giving them, whatever the press release is. I'm just saying. I'm magnificently skeptical of this stuff, that's all. Erdogan has his own motivations. He has to go against the Kurds to prevent uprising in his own country and obvious to gather support around him. Yeah, Erdogan, they tried to overthrow him, I think, 2-3 years ago? Yeah. I have a feeling Turkey's involvement in Syria is to help the United States stir tensions. It could be. It could be. I mean, understand, Syria had a bunch of foreign people coming into the country stirring up trouble. Yes, there might have been an uprising in part, but that uprising went to shit very quickly. I mean, you had all these other groups trying to take over the kingdom. The government nearly collapsed. If it wasn't for the not Soviet Union, if it wasn't for Russia and Iran helping it up, they would have collapsed. And you would have had Syria as if it was another Libya. I'm going to end this, but I'll ask this. Do you believe that our role in that region of the world has been positive? I'll leave it at that. Do you believe it's been positive? And if you're being really honest with yourself, the answer to that is, of course, no. Destroyed Iraq. You had a coup in Iran, a government that was prospering. You had a coup in Iran that turned that over to a military dictator. Then, at that point, there was another uprising, in which case, overthrown their dictator, and they put in a religious maniac. But at the very least, it's their religious maniac. It's not our religious maniac. After destroying Iraq, all those people fled into these different areas of the countries, creating refugees in one country after the next, creating uprisings in Libya, destroying that country, uprising in Syria, trying to destroy that country. I mean, I'm making a point that we've set one country after the next on fire. Our hands in this. Whatever the military, whatever the United States media wants to look at this, it is a magnificently myopic viewpoint to be able to look at all of the fires that were set all around the Middle East and come away from that still with the perspective that whatever the United States is doing in that region of the world is right, or whatever the United States is doing in that region of the world is good. We've fucked up magnificently. Whether it was intentional or not, it doesn't really matter. We fucked up magnificently. I don't think our motives in that region of the world were good. No, I don't. I don't think we function as good actors. I think we function as actors who have certain things that they want to acquire, things that they want to accomplish. Those particular issues of those countries were just in the way. That's the way I think of it. Now, media looks at it as the United States just messed up. The United States just fucked up. The person might have been incompetent, but they're not bad actors. I'm saying that is a bias that they should not have. That's a bias they shouldn't have. They should assume, in some cases, bad intentions, because bad intentions are part of the process at times. Like, I don't want to belabor this point, but I don't think I'm making that point. It's just an assumption of good intentions is an assumption. It's not something that somebody who's in the news, who's recording the news, who's recounting the news to the public should take on with them as they recount it. That is a bias. That is a magnificent bias that they should have. They shouldn't have as they give the news. All right. I am going... Peter Lehrman. The discussion on foreign policy is often clouded as many conflate values and interests. Media and politicians like to use the term values, but actually the policy is oriented around interests. Yes. Peter Lehrman. They say Mike Chat is one of the smartest on the net. I'm beginning to believe him, man. I'm beginning to believe him. Yes. Agreed. It's about money and control of resources. Yeah, James Michael Sarvis. Yeah, it is about money and resources. Well, with one caveat. You can't say it's about money and resources. That looks bad. That looks callous. So it's not cut in money and resources. It's cut in foreign policy and political terms. They're going to say certain things. We need to go into Libya because, yeah, there's some darkies who Gaddafi is going to kill. And we need to protect those darkies. And we're going to protect them by dropping bombs on their heads. That's what we're going to do. Because at the end of the day, being killed by a bomb from America is better than getting their head chopped off by somebody in the Middle East. If we, use a bomb, somebody will have to repair that bomb. That's another job. That's another job. Yeah, they make shit up. And they make shit up purely for the point of pretext. There's a Newsweek article that I have where the United States was going to paint a plane in order to make it look like a plane where they can get shot down, and if that plane gets shot down, use that as a pretext for war against the Soviet Union. There's a lot of these cases. Same thing in Iraq. We paint a plane in a particular way. If the plane gets shot down, we use it as a pretext for war in Iraq. Gulf of Tonkin, used as a pretext for war in Vietnam. At some point, I just wish the public gets wiser to this stuff and say, okay, I'm going to be skeptical of what they're saying. And I'm not just going to take what they're saying as being true until we see evidence of what they're saying is actually true. What the military commander in this said may be true, but I'm making the point that the reporter doesn't know. He doesn't know. Yet still he reported to his audience as if he does. And again, never asking the larger questions. Why are we there? Why are there people getting killed there? Why is there Americans there? Should we be there? Do we have authorization to be there? It doesn't seem like we have constitutional authority to be in this country. It doesn't seem like we have constitutional authority to be in a lot of those countries. How are we in these countries? The media gives them a pass. Like I said, I'm not going to overly belabor the point, but the media totally gives them a pass on that. Gives them a pass. The reason why Americans are the way they are is because this is the media that they watch. This is the news that they think they have. The faux knowledge. It's like the bare, narrow slip of knowledge that doesn't really give them a wider context on what the fuck is going on. And yet, in some degree, they think they have an idea of what the fuck is going on. They hear that report, oh, it's Free Syrian Forces. The United States is working for Free Syrian Forces. The United States is working with terrorists. Calling them the Syrian Democratic Forces doesn't give context to what's taking place. We shouldn't be in this country. That Syrian Defense Force, I understand they call themselves Democratic Force, but they can call themselves whatever they want. They're not the Syrian government. And they're not the Syrian government. So, I will leave it at that. Like I said, not going to belabor the point. NBC News annoys me. So does CNN. A lot of those news places annoys me. You can go to them for basic facts about what took place. And you can't even use the term facts. You can go to them to see, I guess, a narrative and to get ideas on events. But you always have to cross-check it with other stuff. Otherwise, it's like you get half of the story or part of the story. It's like the parts of the story are missing. Important parts are missing. So, I'm going to leave it at that. I just wanted to point that out and raise those questions since they did not raise those questions. And I will leave it at that. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support the Patreon. Thanks, everyone.